Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cheat Codes. Also, Happy New Year. So today's episode is all about the roller coaster of crowdfunding, specifically Kickstarter. So it's rewarding, but it's also one of the hardest things a team can do. My guest today is Elizabeth Olson. Elizabeth is a PR and marketing specialist, also a WIGI advisor, and we've survived 2 campaigns together in 1 year. So we're going to talk about the pros and cons of the crowdfunding model, and specifically that automatic community buy-in that everyone talks about. Is it a gift? Is it a curse? But we're going to break down the different phases of the campaign and why creating plans on the fly is a recipe for total team burnout. Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome to Cheat Codes.
Well, thank you, and Happy New Year, everyone.
Will
and
you
I
please
apologize in advance. I have a cat that wants to partake.
We support it. We are fur friend friendly. Will you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
So I've been in the games industry since 1989 and started out as the founding editor-in-chief of Game Informer, and then transitioned to the other side of that to Virgin Interactive kind of when they were at their height of wealth and power as the third largest publisher in the world. One of my first big assignments was throwing $1 million breakfast with Disney for The Lion King. Over the years, I have gone, deep into marketing, worked for companies like Adobe and stuff like that, worked on many well-known titles like Tomb Raider, etc., worked at agency. But at the beginning of 2009, I kind of transitioned and started my own consultancy specializing in indies, mostly because I like to wear a lot of different hats, and the indies just need that more than a great big company does. And so that's basically what I've been doing since 2009, is doing marketing, PR, business development for indie studios, with an occasional dip into something bigger or outside the industry. And then I'm also the director of marketing and communications for the new Telltale.
That's awesome. So if you listen to our podcast for a long time, you know that I love indie games, and Elizabeth is well entrenched in the indie space. So it's that world that's brought us together. Elizabeth on the PR and marketing side, and me on the social media and community side. So those are the things that have to have top tier communication and have to walk hand in hand for any successful campaign, whether that's launch, crowdfunding, or otherwise.
Exactly.
So bringing it to Kickstarter, people think of it as kind of just one event. That's one thing. But it's a series of things. We have pre-campaign, we have stretch goals, we have so many phases. So which phase do you feel is the hardest to manage from PR or community standpoint?
Well, I think if you would have asked me prior to last year, I would have said it was while the campaign was active. Now, I have to say it might be more stressful, or certainly more energy has to go into the planning all the way around the board. To your point, now there's all these different phases. They do absolutely affect each other. I don't think it's a situation anymore where somebody can say, oh no, we can't find money, so quick, let's throw up a Kickstarter. It just doesn't work like that. I think now there's pre-planning, pre-campaign, all of that. And that's on top of the fact that you're trying to make a game during all of this. And unfortunately, it's an area you just can't scrimp on, because we've had instances, and we'll get into this, I think, in our discussion, where the goals, even though they were performing well, no one bothered to do the math to make sure that, we could still reach great heights, because they started to literally run out of rewards. There's so many things. And so I think now I would say planning is slightly more draining on the team and the resources than while it's live. I do think if you are good in your planning and your preparation, you can mitigate the stress during the campaign, but it's still something that you are living and breathing full time during the length of the campaign.
It doesn't shut off. Once you're shut off.
No, in fact, that's really when some of the crazy begins, right? A whole different level of crazy. And so I hear this all the time. Oh, well, we'll just do this. And I'm like, no, you won't. And you also have to make sure that you've thought through the flexibility of being able to adapt to changes that happen in your campaign. Maybe you do sell out of all your big tiers early on, or maybe you're not getting the response you hoped for, or maybe you've offered up a reward that now really gives your audience, your backers, a lot of influence on the back end, and you've got to be able to respond to all of that. And so I think really thorough planning, thinking through every scenario and making sure that you've built a plan where you also have pivots.
True, because there are times where you have to adapt in real time.
Absolutely. And nothing will derail your team faster.
Yes, that is true. And it really affects all angles, because if you have someone who's listening to the community side and someone who's also handling the marketing and the public face of this, to sync those beats as you are pivoting in real time it's not a headache, but it is a workout.
It's a choreographed dance.
Yes.
Not a freestyle. And I think it's really important to, respect all sides of that. And depending on what your campaign is and depending on your goals and your needs and your game and all of those sort of things, different aspects are going to play a bigger part in that. For some, it's really all about the rewards, or for others, it's really the final product. For others, it's what's the PR beat and the press that you're getting on it. On another, it's absolutely all the community. So I can't say that it's one size fits all. It's not. You have to give decent thought into your objectives, who your core audience is. And if you don't know what you think may work best for you, do some testing before you ever even go into the campaign.
That is sound advice. So I talked about in the beginning of this episode that our jobs require a lot of communication. So you want the big press beats. And then I have a community of backers who really feel like they own this game and they want the news first. So how do we balance those things and get a healthy compromise?
So I think the first thing is to realize that, back in the day when Kickstarter first started, because I did some of the really early Kickstarters, and then I swore off Kickstarters for more than a decade. And you've heard me say, I'm never, ever doing another Kickstarter again.
I've heard you say that twice so far.
At least. But in the early days, everybody ran to Kickstarter, and it was a really great platform for being able to find funding. But just like backers and things like that, the press absolutely got fatigued, because now they were in a position, and not only were they expected to cover games that were coming, games that were launching, but these games that were undergoing Kickstarters, many that never saw the light of day. And so they basically put a ban on covering any Kickstarters for years. And so you're only realistically going to get big PR beats if you've got something more to your game, to your announcement, than the campaign itself, for one. So what is truly unique and genuine? And I know everyone thinks that they have something unique and genuine, but is it truly press worthy that you're announcing this game and that the campaign is part of that? So does it have licensed property? Are you doing it with major studio? Whatever that looks like. And be honest with yourself, because if not, community absolutely should be your biggest priority. Now, that said, when you do have these situations where you've got big PR beats, again, I think the types of topics can be different. If it's all about the celebrities that are doing your voiceover or something like that, there are key beats that you can do with your core press that your community is not going to care as much about. They probably care more about the gameplay itself, or being able to be in on the ground floor of making certain decisions that help shape the game. So talking about all of the possible newsworthy moments that the press and or community will care about, and figuring out how to present those and how to divide those up, I think becomes really important. I've run into situations recently where the people behind the campaign really, really wanted to reward their community with the teasers and trailers and everything first. The problem with that is if a trailer's out there, a trailer's out there and it's no longer newsworthy. And so I think that's when you really have to sit down and talk about what is our core objective with this particular initiative. Is it to get broad press and maybe make people outside of the campaign that may not already know about it, outside the community know about it? Or is it really to reward the people that are already following us and paying attention? And I think you have to have some really honest discussions about that.
That is a big decision to make because there is no Kickstarter without your community.
Right.
And
absolutely.
To be in front of the press, it's the Kickstarter is not the beat. The Kickstarter is the end. And so to craft those things at the same time while listening to the community and making sure that you still have things to reveal to the community, that was very tricky dance. And
Absolutely.
there was a strange expectation from certain people to say, well, we'll just ask the community not to say anything.
Yeah, and it doesn't work that way.
Right?
Both know that. And it's, and again, it's absolutely, I think that your backers and your community and the people that already know and are following you, they're already qualified, right? So they are more likely to convert. However, once you've saturated them with message, if you want your campaign to be bigger and you're lucky enough to have a hook or a product big enough or something big enough that the press actually cares, I don't think you can just throw that away either. You want to bring more people into the campaign because it will take you beyond what your community is able to fund, right? And so I think if you are lucky enough to be in that position, because not every Kickstarter is going to be in that position, most won't be lucky enough to be in that position, but I think having really honest conversations about, do you have that mass media appeal and draw? And if so, what are your objectives in using that? Otherwise, absolutely, your vetted, qualified people that are already fans and following you are your most valuable.
Do the fans influence how you pitch and talk to the press or talk to other people?
I think so. I think, the nice thing is now you've got pre-campaign and stuff. That's a new tool that I think is amazing on Kickstarter because it really gives you some sense of what's possible and how successful the campaign might be. And it may help shape, do we spend money in advertising? Do we spend money in sponsoring influencers and things like that? You can make some of those decisions early on. But the other side of that is if you're able to amass a big following with your pre-campaign, that's newsworthy. And so you've just strengthened your, I guess, proof of concept or proof of traction in a way that is measurable that you didn't necessarily have before when you were trying to reach the media and the press with your campaign.
That is very true.
Honestly, the pre-campaign, I know that Kickstarter in its evolution has added a lot of new tools and toys and bells and whistles and everything like that to make your campaigns more robust, more successful. Pre-campaign, I think, was my favorite.
I think so too. I feel you feel the momentum building.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel when it's timed well, it's the launch almost feels like a deep exhale because you've seen the anticipation build and you see not only that happening, but the community starting to evangelize before the campaign even launches. And that's really inspiring.
Yeah, it absolutely, like I said, gives you insight as to where to spend your money. It starts to give you early people that you can access for a feedback loop for what kinds of rewards are they hoping for? What are they hoping to hear from you? And so I think, and again, I think in the case of Kickstarter, as we learned in both that we did, there's the advertising side of things. And I think it predetermines, do you go ahead and spend against the future, or are you taking your efforts and spending them more in other ways, like really hitting your socials and Reddit and places like that. So I think it can help you shape what your campaign and your efforts and initiatives are going to look like.
Yes. And I think it's important to know what you're capable of and what you're willing to do. And we've been in spaces where we're figuring this out in real time with real deadlines rather than ahead. And that's it's tricky. You know, the saying failure to plan is planning for failure. And it's not necessarily a failure in your Kickstarter campaign might fail, which is a full possibility, but it is such an emotional drain. And that can be another aspect of failure. So what are some ways to kind of build in this plan before you get to the pre-campaign?
Well, again, I think having really honest conversations about what your team's bandwidth and abilities, what materials you have to work with, what state things are in, if you're going to build things, who's going to build them, and what the cost of that all is, because there's absolutely a cost to running any crowdfunding. And that's all got to be accounted for. It's not like, oh, we could just do it internal. Guess what? That still has a cost. You still have to figure your man hours on it. And if you're a tiny team, you want to save money, you don't want to outsource, but truthfully, your team is also still building the product, right? And so I think you have to weigh what's going to work for your team and not stretch them too thin. And I think the more you plan, and if you have extra assets that you've planned for, then you don't have the crunches and the panic, which it's like when you have to sprint in an emergency, and when you're done, you are far more exhausted than you were, if you had just taken the time to walk that same distance. And so the same thing holds true with any of these campaigns. It's already emotionally draining, stressful. It's scary to do Kickstarters. It's worrisome, and everyone wants to do their best foot forward, right? So I think planning for all of those situations as much as you can, making sure that you have a deep resource of materials that you can work from, and having in your plan multiple low impact things, whether that's interviews with the teams or really quick check-ins or dev diaries or whatever the case may be, streaming of progress, work in progress, whatever that is. All of it can be interesting and keep your community engaged. Yes. Make sure you've got a lot of that in your quiver, so to speak.
Yes, because I find that people forget to consider the social aspect when planning, and that takes time and energy. And Absolutely. Sometimes that is every Saturday from 9 to noon for the duration of the campaign. And that's just the way it looks.
Well, because you have to do social when people are paying attention, right? And then there's all of the time to actually make all those social assets, which is a huge amount of time. The other thing I think that I really dig about Kickstarter now that is with newer campaigns that wasn't in the old campaigns are social goals.
Yes.
I think social goals are super cool as a way to keep your community. Let's say I've funded, but I want to see the campaign be all it can be as somebody that backed it. If there are really great social goals built into the campaign, then I'm going to go back and I'm going to help amplify, and I'm going to be part of the discussion during the length of the campaign, not just, oh, I backed and now I don't have to pay attention to it until they tell me whether or not they were successful.
I'm a huge fan of social goals, and being on the community end, it's hearing from the community. And you do hear people saying, well, I'm tired of having to do things for this campaign, but you don't see a drop off in people who are doing it. So there's a point where you're listening to the community, but you're also not listening to the community. You're watching what they do and not listening necessarily to what they say. And I love the idea that people who feel like they may not have the resources can spend a little time to make a video, post or repost, like or share. And those are the things that keep a campaign moving forward.
Right, exactly. I think, one could dump $100 into a campaign, but if you don't have $100, let's say you have $20, but you're doing a lot of the other stuff to help amplify the campaign and providing feedback and stuff like that, that's every bit as valuable. And, so now you do have the ability to give, depending on what type of contributor to a campaign you are, And so I think that's also a really nice newer aspect of Kickstarter that I like. I also think there's something really important about the community that we haven't talked about yet. That is, I was just reading an article this weekend about crowdfunding and how I guess people at large feel about crowdfunding.
Right.
And many of them are contributors, whether it's GoFundMe, whether it's whatever. So it was looking in general, not just at Kickstarter or not just at GoFundMe or anything like that, but it was looking at crowdfunding in general. And it said that there's still some skepticism of how is the money actually being spent, what's happening with the funds. Obviously, you have to build trust with that community, and community is the best, and social are the best ways to build that trust and to keep that trust deepening. And I think letting them in on what you're up to, and that's something that you aren't going to be turning to the press all the time to do, or you're not going to necessarily be putting on the campaign page itself. So I think making sure that you have a strong community that shores up your page, whether it's Discord or whatever your key socials are. For us, it's been Discord, but I think that's so important and I think you have to be a little transparent about how the money is really being used.
Yes.
And the realities of the development situation that you're in.
That's very true. Transparency goes a long way because in internet time, a day is a year. So when you tell someone something's going to happen and it has not happened immediately because of so many things that could happen, they feel like they were lied to. And we see that and we hear that, and there has to be a level of transparency. People can understand, okay, we hear you and we took a note of that. This will not happen overnight, but here we are in the progress of this.
Right.
And that is a huge deal to community to know that you are working towards something that they care about.
Right. I think we take for granted because, I've been in game development a very long time, and most of the campaigns I've done have been for games. And so I take for granted that, these things are going to happen and there are going to be delays. Delays are, business as usual, unfortunately, if you work in the industry. But if you don't work in the industry and you're a fan of an IP or you're a fan of a developer or something like that, you don't have the context for There's going to be delays and why are there delays? And, you say you're using it for this. What does that mean? So it's your opportunity for letting them peek behind the curtain a bit in a way that will make them, I think, appreciate you more.
Yes.
Which I think is really strong. And again, regular ad campaign can't do that. It's one of, I think, the pros of doing a Kickstarter is you really start to build a strong community that you can be genuine with and that they will evangelize you harder.
They will.
Than any expensive ad campaign. So
that is very true. It's the fans there are certain fandoms. It is just as overwhelming as they are incredible.
Absolutely. Well, which I think brings up another point, which is specifically tied to your backers and your fans. So the downside of opening up the curtain and letting everyone in is, and I say this all the time, you have to be careful to not let the tail wag the dog. So once you have taken someone's money, once you've let them into your community, once you've let them into your insiders, they now feel some ownership over what you're building and over your campaign. And so they expect you to respond to their requests. And I think, again, this can be mitigated by giving them realistic expectations of how much might change and saying, okay, instead of saying, what would you like to see next? Say, here are the things that our team has come up with that we would like to implement in the game at some point. Help us prioritize those.
Yes. Yes.
That way you're not getting this bloated creature that now is going to take 3 times the budget, 3 times the time, and will never come out. And I think we can all list some Kickstarters, some crowdfunding that's done that. Some of them are quite famous. And I think it helps them understand. Then they're not disappointed when you're not able to put in the feature that they most wanted, or, they will still feel like you're listening to them.
And they're there because they like your work.
Absolutely.
So you have to be able to trust that you do the work that they like, but you still have to be like a little bit of guidance. For instance, when my kids were small and they wanted to see everything, I would still pick out things. If we go shopping, I'll say, I'm picking out the shirt, but my question is, well, do you like the red one or do you like the blue one?
Absolutely. Give them rails.
Right. It's still what I picked.
That'll keep you on scope. And I think especially for indies, they don't often get this really direct feedback. And so they really welcome it because they're fans. They're doing it because they're passionate about what they're building as much as any player's ever been passionate about something they've played. So I think it's really easy for them to go, oh, that's a great idea. We'll also do that. And the next thing you know, you have this Katamari ball and it no longer resembles what you started at. And that's, I think, a quick path to failure.
Yes.
And so again, it gets back to okay, let's think through the scenarios. And if this, what happens and how are we responding? What have we got prepared for that? So I would literally recommend spending months preparing for those scenarios and building up your repository of assets and all of that before you ever even launch your pre-campaign.
More like a choose your.
A little bit. Like, okay, so yeah, fair Kickstarter is a choose your own adventure.
So we talked about how there is a big lift when it comes to marketing, PR, and community. There's something that's often forgotten about is the dev lift, because during the Kickstarter campaign is essentially it's QA happening right in that moment where people are expecting to take part in what you are building. So there is a build and correct that's happening in parallel to the marketing beats that you're hitting for Kickstarter. So how do you align those spaces?
So I think first that first you want to make sure that some of the dev voices are heard throughout your campaign, because I think it adds authenticity. And if people just wanted to be marketed to, they'd turn on the TV, right? So I think that you want to make sure you have those dev voices. But conversely, I think you also want to make sure that you are preparing your devs for what this onslaught of feedback, good and bad, is going to be, and how to balance that and how to respond to that and how to not take it so personally. And again, help put those guardrails in place, but you also have to have somebody that's there that can respond. Sure. It's not like the dev team can go, okay, we've pressed the go button and now we're just stepping back and call us when it's all over. It doesn't work that way. That said, again, there's usually lack of sleep and high emotions and everything like that. I think trying to find a way that you can pace and I think remove some of the potential for explosive outcomes.
Yes.
Is planning and being prepared for those scenarios. I don't know how, honestly, I think it's because you also want the devs to be able to go to their community and bring people in. Everybody on the team needs to be 100% behind rallying folks, because people are more likely to back campaigns from people they know and care about. So,
yes, and that's true. Sometimes from our end in the marketing and PR and community, sometimes that's just as simple as us creating a template for them to share, because Absolutely. People don't know how to articulate those things.
That's another example of those rails. If you've got stuff prepared for them so they don't have to overthink it, they don't have to get stressed out about it. And maybe if they're not the ones that are watching the forums all the time, maybe you do a weekly recap of, here were the best comments we saw on our forums and across our community. And here were the things, obviously we're not going to please all people at all the time. Here are the concerns that we saw being voiced the most, or the questions that seem to keep popping up. So maybe we should think about writing up a message that addresses that.
Yes.
Or so I think that there are ways that you can shield involve the team, but shield them also some, because we've all heard the horror stories about the dev team people who jumped on social and shot back at people that.
Yes, because we get it. It's your baby.
It's your baby.
Also,
we absolutely get it.
people get very angry about everything online.
Look, anytime something involves your baby or your money, and in this case, you're talking both.
Yes, but it is definitely important for the community marketing and PR side to be that gatekeeper for those spaces and to create things. For instance, if you're on Discord, to create a forum where people can properly share and document issues or bugs in a way where you can review that. That way you're not wading through hundreds of comments and no one's piling on, but you're also creating a form of organization so that you understand what things have the most priority and what's being repeated more often.
Right. I also think if you know your team, look, no dev team has, 100% trained spokespeople in every role. That just doesn't happen. You're going to have someone who's a bit awkward and doesn't feel comfortable. You're going to have somebody that's super visual. You're going to have that breakout star, that just has charisma. As someone planning the campaign from the marketing and comms and community side of things, know how to prepare templates and methods of communicating, scheduled segments that are tailored to the team members and their strengths.
Yes.
So some people are better on video. Other people are better in written word. Other people let their art speak for themselves, whatever that is. Because again, I think it's important that your backers and your community hear from the dev team. I also think it's important that the dev team see the love. Because it absolutely, as much as it's draining, can be 100% energizing. But I also think finding that buffer that you can be, so planning for it and letting everybody kind of shine in the way that they shine best is, I think, a hallmark of a good campaign.
Also, something that I've learned in this space is being ready to hear no, because the dev team may not be able to do that. The comms team may not be able to make things may not be able to happen. And we have to be able to pivot and either address it through messaging or pivot completely.
Or look at this cool other thing we're doing over here.
Right. Ta-da!
It happens. Look, it happens not just in Kickstarter campaigns. My meetings this morning were exactly about, do we have this? No. Can we have this? No. Because teams are stretched. I mean, right now in particular, budgets are stretched, teams are stretched. Everybody's trying to do more with less. And so I think but I can't stress enough, taking the time to plan, to think through the different scenarios, to think about how you're going to leverage the community. What is their role in your success? I think is crucial.
Definitely. And it's important to start listening before you launch, before you get to the pre-campaign, before you have to have ears and eyes in your community spaces so that you're aware of what they want, what they know, what they understand, and what they may need more information about.
Well, that and also looking at previous campaigns for similar games, similar genre, or from your own team or something like that, reading the reviews, seeing what people are saying about those games online, if they've seen a trailer of something similar, see what the forums have said about that. I think forewarned is forearmed, or forearmed is forewarned, whatever. I think it's part of your job in preparing so that stuff doesn't go off the rails, because the energy and drain that happens once stuff goes off the rails is toxic. It is. Your team may not recover from it.
True.
And I think that, while it can be an incredible high, it can also absolutely rip a team apart.
That is true, because the Kickstarter clock is still ticking as your team is being ripped apart.
And it's like being ripped apart. It's like a reality show. It's like being ripped apart in public view.
Yes.
And you don't want that.
No, you don't. And this podcast, consider this not a discouragement from anything,
No.
but just an understanding that there are many sides and there are cautionary tales as there are tales of success and massive major wins.
Yeah, no, just like you're doing milestones and a walk back calendar and everything for your project, you need to project manage and plan your campaign every
Yes.
bit as much. And I think with all of that said, and especially with some of the new tools and resources that Kickstarter has put out there, and looking at the funding environment right now, especially for indies, it's incredibly tough. And yet I am more excited than ever about what I'm seeing come out of indie teams. They're so innovative and so passionate. And I think that translates. I personally think that the indie story is coming across Kickstarter. That's part of what drives the passion and the heartbeat, right? So I'm not sure I'll say, oh, I'm absolutely gung-ho pro Kickstarter. I have not yet said this year, oh, dear God, I'm not doing another Kickstarter. Because I do think the tools are there. And I think Kickstarter and crowdfunding is going to become really important to indies for the foreseeable future. If you have the ability, the bandwidth, the foresight, the time to plan to do them. If you'd asked me this question in January of last year, you would have received a very different answer.
Really?
Yeah. But I think just watching funding dry up, making it so difficult. I am starting to see some of the money sources go, oh, well, maybe indies, but for them, it's a lot of work for very little ROI. And so, which is why I think a lot of traditional funding shies away from indies. And I think with a lot of the indie publishers, they're being very careful, very measured with their investments because the rug could be pulled out from under them at any given time as well. Things are just not stable right now. And so the nice thing is if you're going to your community and your fans for funding, that's pretty reliable as long as you plan for it so it doesn't break your team and so that you can be successful and so that you don't burn those same fans and community.
Yes. Well said. Do you have any final words? If I'm an indie developer and I come to you and I said, Ebeth, I'm thinking about doing a Kickstarter, what would you tell me?
So my first thing is, you need the time to plan it correctly. You need to be 100% honest about what you can produce. You have to be well on your way before you even start to think about a Kickstarter about how are all of these pieces of, we'll call them marketing collateral or collateral that you need for the team. How are those going to get done? Because they absolutely count against your, it often becomes a balance of, do I develop the game or do I work on this stuff for our Kickstarter? So you can't discount how important it is to have those materials. It is no longer just, oh, if we build it, they will come. It doesn't work like that. There's so much competition. But I think if you take all of those things into account and you think about who is our really audience, what's our true objectives, if you think through those scenarios, I think you can be more successful now than you've been able to be in probably the last 15 years with a Kickstarter.
Well said. It's been a pleasure to have you on this podcast, just like it's been a pleasure to work on Kickstarter campaigns with you.
Absolutely.
Even through the stress, we've always found a way to laugh and to decompress about the things that we've been through.
Yeah, I think that also, look, sometimes things are outside your control. You want to try and again, do what you can. But I think keeping a sense of humor about it. And at the end of the day, we make games for a living. And so we got to have a little fun doing this.
We do. And I don't mean this in like a hyperbolic way. I love indie games. I love games.
Me too.
And I am grateful to be in this space. And if I can help someone because I believe in them, even let me be transparent. Sometimes we don't have to believe in it.
No,
we don't. The game itself, but
it helps.
It helps,
and it certainly makes it more fun.
Right, But as gamers and as people who love the gaming industry, we have an understanding of the people who do. And that drives us forward, and we keep going and we go.
So yeah, again, will I be recommending to clients this year that they consider crowdfunding? Yeah, I probably will, just because there's so many amazing games out there that aren't finding the right homes yet. So, but again, I think doing it with proper planning and transparency and honesty, and there's no one right way to do a Kickstarter.
Yes.
And I think if you can embrace that, then you can have success.
Well said. So thank you so much for being with me on Cheat Codes. Where can people find you if they want to link with you?
Easiest is probably LinkedIn. Otherwise on socials, I'm eBeth O on pretty much everything. And I tend to show up at most of the West Coast shows, industry shows, both summits and consumer facing. So I'm around.
You're around. Yes. I see you everywhere. So to stay in note with Women in Games International, please visit our website at getwiggy.com and subscribe to our newsletter. And you can find us on socials at GetWiggy. Thank you for tuning to Cheat Codes, and we will see you next time.